All right, guys. So we watched a video yesterday describing basic ideas standard deviation. All right, for the most part, in a normal distribution, the standard deviation describes how spread out the data is, and we could talk about how far a point is away from the mean. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to calculate standard deviation algebraically by hands, and then we'll also do it on the graphing calculator. All right, so this first part, we're going to look at calculating standard deviation by hands. All right, so for example 1, it says calculate the standard deviation for the following sets of numbers. All right, so the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to be filling out this chart on the right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take these set of values and we're going to copy them to our first column where it just says X. Okay, so I'm literally just going to write down the numbers in the first column. Okay, and I put a blank copy of the notes on the Unit 7 page as well as the e-learning page for today. So hopefully you're able to print out the notes. If a printer's not available, you can kind of watch the notes and maybe go back and fill them in on your Chromebook on something like Cami. Okay, so now for calculating standard deviation, if you remember our formula for calculating the mean, we used the symbol X bar for mean, and then our formula was the sum of all the terms divided by n, which is the total number of terms. So we could start there. If we count the numbers in our set, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we see that we have 8 terms. So that means that our n equals 8. Okay, and then if we were to add all the numbers up, we're going to get a sum of 204. So in this case, our mean is going to be 204 divided by 8, which comes out to be 25.5. So that's the value we're going to be using. That is our mean for the set. And standard deviation bases everything off of the mean. Okay, so that's step 1. We calculated the mean. Step 2, we're going to find the deviation from each data value, meaning we're going to take each value and subtract it by the mean. Okay, so for the first one, we would take 20, subtract it by 25.5, which gives us a value of negative 5.5. Okay, and then we'll do that for each one. 29 minus 25.5 is 3.5. Okay, 19 minus 25.5, negative 6.5. And we'll go do that for each value. Okay, so as you can see, this is kind of a lengthy process, right? We want to have the idea of how to calculate it by hand. We'll do a couple examples, but for the most part, we will do most of our calculations on the calculator. Okay, so step 1, we calculated the mean. Step 2, we found the deviation from each value. Okay, now what we want is we want to make sure that each of these values are positive. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the square, we're going to square each value. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take all the values in column 2 and we're just going to square it. So negative 5.5 squared gives us 30.25. 3.5 squared is 12.25. Okay, and you get the idea. Negative 6.5 squared, 42.25. Okay, so that's our step 3. We're squaring all the values from column 2. Okay, so that's step 3. Okay, now, to calculate the standard deviation, what we want to do is we want to find the mean of our squared deviations. So in other words, we want to find the average of this third column. So in order to do that, we need to first add all the values up. So if we add all them up, we get that. They come out to be 144. So that's the sum of all the values in that last column. Okay, and what we're trying to find here, it's actually called the variance. Okay, so our variance is going to be the sum of this last column. So that's each value minus the mean squared. And then what we're going to do is we're going to divide that sum by the number of terms, which is still 8. So in this case, we get 144 divided by 8, which gives us a variance of 18. Okay, and that's our step 4. Okay, so step 5, we're going to find now the standard deviation. So Standard deviation, we use the symbol. We use a lot of Greek letters for our statistics. So we're going to use the symbol sigma. Okay, and it's basically a circle with a little line on top of it. Okay, so in this case, standard deviation which again, we're going to use sigma, is just the square root of the variance. So we just calculated our variance to be 18. So in this case, we get the square root of 144 divided by 8, which does come out to be 18. So the square root of 18, and that gives us a standard deviation of 4.24. Okay, so again, we don't totally understand what that means at this point. We learned from the video that really tells you how spread apart our data is. As far as we know, a normally distributed set, if we go one mean to the left and right of one standard deviation to the left and right of the mean, that would be in a normal curve 68% of our data. Okay, as we go 2 standard deviations away from the mean, that would be 95%, 3 standard deviations, 99.7. Okay, so that basically gives us how spread apart our data is. Okay, so what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to do and try example 2. Okay, so at this point you can pause the video and I want you guys to try the examples. Okay, and then what we'll do when we come back, I will have the worked out solutions. Okay, so I'm going to stop the video at this point. So I want you now to try these 2 examples, 1 and 2. Okay, so you're calculating these standard deviations by hand. Okay, so go through the steps we just did. Find the mean first. Okay, and then really all you need is this last column. Okay, so you can kind of do that steps in your calculator. Take each value, subtract it by the mean, square it, and that's what you'll write in the chart. Okay, once you have this chart filled out, find the sum of those values, divide that by n, that's your variance, and then if you take the square root of that, that's your standard deviation. All right.